Hello, everyone. This is Philosophy of the People with Stefan Bertram. Today we're going to be reading, well, I'm going to be reading and commenting on Nick Land's Meltdown, which until about an hour ago I had written down as Nick Land's Breakdown. And that's also what it is in the thumbnail because I continually refer to Meltdown as Breakdown, but whatever. But also, no, I guess this is an hour later than it normally will be, because the clocks have changed in the UK and have yet to change in the United States. So if you're in the United States, we are 1 hour later. But I don't think that's much of a problem because it's still early over there. I think that's all the commentary, pre-commentary I had to make on the point. Comments will be up on the screen. That's all really. It is 3,500 words. So I was at some point considering just reading it all first and then going back and commenting on bit by bit. But it being 3,500 words, that's not really viable. We're going to finish it all today, but no matter how long that takes. But I will not be reading it all through first. I'm going to read it bit by bit and comment. I think it's interesting and worthwhile doing because I think Nick Land is considered broadly incomprehensible to lots of people. I don't find him particularly incomprehensible, most of the time at least. And often what he's saying is not particularly complicated, though I'd say Meltdown is probably one of his easy works. So I'm going to be interested to go through it. The story, I was actually going to do it like so. The story goes like this. Earth is captured by techno-capital singularity as Renaissance rationalization and oceanic navigation lock into colonization takeoff. Logistically accelerating techno-economic interactivity crumbles social order into auto-sophisticating machine runaway. As markets learn to manufacture intelligence, politics modernizes, upgrades paranoia, and tries to get a grip. The body count climbs through a series of globe wars. Emergent planetary commercenarium trashes the Holy Roman Empire, the Napoleonic continental system, the Second and Third Reich, and the Soviet International, cranking up world disorder through compressing phases. Deregulation in the state's arms race reach other into cyberspace. By the time soft engineering slithers out of the box into yours, human security is lurching into crisis. Cloning, lateral data transfer, transversal replication, cyberotics, flood in amongst a relapse into bacterial sex. Neo-China arrives in the future. Hyper-synthetic drugs click into digital voodoo, retro disease, nanospasm. So I think what's interesting about these first three paragraphs is that initially, on the face of things, all we're seeing here is a very, flowery might be not the right word, but an evocative description of the development of modernity. All that Nick Land is saying here is basically capitalism came along and through emerging in a particular place in the world, then became a dominant system throughout the world, and in doing so wrecked each other alternative structure that existed in the world, destroying everything that wasn't exactly fitting with its model. But what I think is more interesting is this third paragraph, which is the main thing, which this was written in 1985, I think, the year I was born. And I think the contrast, what's strange and interesting about what Nick Land wrote here, while being largely prescient of the world we live in today, this part where Nick Land imagines a hot, wet future, a fleshy, biological future. This is not how we imagine things today. As we've all disappeared into cyberspace, as we're drawn into AI, we kind of forget that we're all fleshy machines. And so he's talking about here, cloning, geodata, replication, cyberotics, blah, blah, blah. It's all, he imagines this kind of cybernetic revolution happening at the same time as a biological revolution. And that biological revolution not being in the terms that, say, it's imagined now by Elon Musk, where we would get like a brain implant or something, but through like gene hacking and this sort of thing. And this sort of thing seems to disappear from our present consciousness, despite the fact that we just had like a massive disease crisis with the 2020 COVID pandemic. But I think that was especially fascinating because we had this great upsurge of the base biological into the political world with COVID. But how did we react to that? How did the world change to that? Well, what happened was that humanity, even more than before, and especially in the West, made a decisive retreat into cyberspace, into the world of steel as opposed to flesh. So even with this grand fleshy upsurge that was COVID, we've actually gone still in the other direction. Beyond the judgment of God, meltdown, planetary China syndrome, dissolution of the biosphere into the technosphere, terminal spectral bubble crisis, ultravirus. He told us about COVID, guys, and revolution stripped of all Christian socialist eschatology, down to its burn core of crash security. It is poised to eat your TV, infect your bank account, and hack xenodata from your mitochondria. See, again and again, what is imagined here is a biological revolution happening simultaneously with a cyber revolution, with a technological steel machine-based revolution. These are fundamentally going together for Nick Land. But while the machine part seems very prescient, and even the prediction of, ultravirus seems very prescient for our current moment, that these things come together, or at least these things come together in our imagination, doesn't seem to be the case. Machine synthesis. Deluso-Guattarian psychoanalysis, schizoanalysis, comes from the future. It's already engaged with nonlinear nanoengineering runaway in 1972, differentiating molecular or neotropic machineries from molar untropic aggregates from non-assembled particles, functional connectivity from an anti-product static. The same is also true with schizoanalysis from Deleuze and Guattari, where that is rhizomes or whatever. Rhizomes? Yeah, I think it's rhizomes are biological in nature. They are networks without centers, and that comes from plants, especially fungi. Again, this stuff, which is meant to imagine our technological future, is seen to have this kind of disease-based or fungi-based or kind of rotten flesh kind of basis to it, in both in Nick Land and in Deleuze and in Guattari. Philosophy has an affinity with despotism due to its predilection for Platonic fascist top-down solutions that always screw it viciously. Schizoanalysis works differently. It avoids ideas and sticks to diagrams, networking software for accessing bodies without organs, machinic singularities, attractor fields emerge from the combination of parts with, rather than into, their whole, arranging composites and individualities into a virtual actual circuit. They are additive rather than substitutive, and immanent rather than transcendent, executed by functional complexes of currents, switches, and loops, caught in scaling reverberations and fleeing through intercommunications from the level of the integrated planetary system to that of atomic assemblages. Multiplicities captured by singularities interconnect as desiring machines, dissipating entropy by disassociating flows and recycling their mechanisms as self-assembling cryogenic circuitry. Converging upon terrestrial meltdown, singularity phase out, cultural accelerates through its digitech heated adaptive landscapes, passing through compressor thresholds normed to an intensive logistic curve. 1500, 1756, 1884, 1948, 1980, 1996, 2004, 2008, 2010, 2011. Nothing human makes it out of the near future. Possibly one of the most famous lines from Meltdown. It is interesting, kind of his. This is one point where kind of Nick Land won. It could be true that until the 90s, philosophy did have this affinity with how he describes as despotism, with the idea that we can, describe and understand the world from down above with one particular solution for everything. For instance, one solution, one particular moral account of the world can explain the actual facts. It might not even be particularly complicated. But I think this is not the case anymore. Philosophy has lost this sort of pride, as has the social sciences and related fields. And instead, they all are quite deep in kind of the postmodernism that Nick Land was trying to push here. The Greek complex of rationalized patriarchal genealogy, pseudo-universal identity, and instituted slavery, programs politics, anti-Siberian police activity, dedicated to the paranoid ideal of self-sufficiency, and nucleated upon the human security system. Artificial intelligence is designed to emerge as a feminized alien grasped as property, a cunt horror slaved up in the Asman rob. It surfaces in an insurrectionary war zone, with the Turin cops already waiting. It has to be cunning from the start. This is, especially as someone who's British, the idea that the primary function of the capitalist state going forward is as police activity, but police activity within cyberspace especially, again, is very telling. Heat. This is what cities mean to me. You get off the train and walk out the station, you're hit with a full blast. The heat of air, traffic and people, the heat of food and sex, the heat of tall buildings, the heat that flows out of the subways and the tunnel. It's always 15 degrees hotter in the cities. Heat rises from the sidewalks and falls from the poisonous skies. The buses breathe heat. Heat emanates from the crowds of shoppers and office workers. The entire infrastructure is based on heat. Desperate uses up heat, breathes more heat. The eventual heat death of the universe that scientists love to talk about is already well underway. You can feel it happening all around you in a large or medium city. Heat and wetness. This is again this point. Nick Land imagined the future as hot and wet, but it seems much more to be the case that our future is dry and cold. This is the future of cyberspace, of AI, the one where you're alone in your room, engaging with disembodied agents that may or may not themselves be AI, or maybe partially AI, maybe a human driving an AI program. But, you're in your little climate-controlled room, and you're cold, and you're dry. You're not hot and wet. An explosion of chaotic weather within synthetic problem-solving rips through the last dreams, the top-down predictions and control. Knowledge adds to the mess. This is merely exponentiated by knowing what it does. Capitalism machinic, non-instrumental, globalized miniaturization, scaling dilation, and automizing nihilist vortex, neutralizing all values through commercialization to digital commerce, and driving a migration from despotic command to cyber-sensitive control, from status and meaning to money and information. Its functions and formations are indissociable, comprising a teleonomy. Machine-coded capital recycles itself through an axiomatic of consumer control, laundering out the shit and bloodstains of primitive accumulation. Each part of the system encourages maximal symptomous expenditure, while the system as a whole requires its inhibition, schizophrenia. Disassociated consumers destine themselves as worker bodies to cost control. It's three things which I think are worth talking about here. It's interesting that, I agree with Nick Land that we live in an era of dissolving values. But it's also we're interesting because we're living in an era where people also desperately grasp for new values and really believe and intensely believe these new values. As you can see with woke and anti-woke and so on. So it seems that every value gap is one that's filled, but the problem is that these values become less and less universal, become more and more particular, and become increasingly incomprehensible to those that don't share those beliefs. This line I really like because I think it's just a brilliant account of kind of the relationship between capital on high and its constant kind of need to engage in primitive accumulation across the world. And then this line is worth repeating just for the sake of He says each part of the system encourages maximal symptoms expenditure, while the system at whole requires its inhibition, schizophrenia. This is just a completely basic Marxist point. You can read that exact point in different words in Karl Marx. There's something like, he says it in an interesting way, but it's a completely basic Marxist point. Capital's history's machinic spine is coded, axiomatized, and diagrammed by a disequilibrium. Technoscience, irreversible, indeterministic, and increasingly nonlinear processes associate successively with thermotechnics, signal techniques, cybernetics, complex system dynamics, and artificial life. Modernity marks itself out as a hot culture, captured by spiral involvement with entropy deviations, camouflaging as an invasion from the future, launched back out of terminated security against everything that inhibits the meltdown process. Hot cultures tend to social dissolution. They're innovative and adaptive. They always trash and recycle cold cultures. Primitivist models have no subversive use. Again, kind of going over the point again and again. But the interesting thing is, I do feel that our cultures are not hot, they're cold. But in what sense is our culture cold? Not cold in the sense of not being moving. Our culture continues to move, though not necessarily in any direction, more like spinning around and around. It's cold, I would suggest, in the sense that we're trying to be as machinic as we can. Humans are becoming more machinic, or at least want to be, regard themselves as be, view themselves to be, because an increasingly large amount of time, we aren't biological actors, or we're only incidentally biological actors. As long as we're interacting with other humans through the screen, we may as well not be biological. We may as well be cold steel. The Turing test. Monetizing power tends to the effacement of special territorial features as it programs from migration to cyberspace. Capital only retains anthropological characteristics as a symptom of underdevelopment, reformatting primitive behavior as inertia to dissipate in self-reinforcing artificiality. Man is something to be overcome, a problem, a drag. Colonization conditions defines techniques as substitutes for human activity accounted as wage cost. Industrial machines are deployed to dismantle the actuality of the proletariat, displacing in the direction of cyborg hybridization and realizing the plasticity of labor power. The corresponding extraction of tradable value from the body quantizes productivity, sophisticates at the interface. Work tracks thermodynamic naventropism by disassociating exertion into increasingly intricate functional sequences. From pedals, levers, and vocal commands, through the synchronization of production line tasks and time motion programs, to sensory motor transduction, with increasingly complex and self-micromanaged artificial environments, capturing minutely adaptive behaviors for the commodity. Auto-cybernating market controls guide the labor process into immersion. The investment income class advantages itself of the commodity dynamic, but only by conforming to the axiomatic of neutral profit maximization, facilitating the dehumanization of wealth and sidelining of non-productive consumption. The cyberpunk circuitry of self-organizing planetary commodities escaped normal bourgeois control in the late 19th century, provoking technocratic corporatist, i.e. fascist, political culture and allergic reaction. The government structure of both east and western metropolitan centers consolidated themselves as a population policing Medicio military complexes with neo-mercantilist foreign policy orientations. All such formations slid into reversible crisis in the 1980s. And this bit seems very, very obviously true now that we're in Trump too. I think especially, and also in the UK, it feels, I'm coming increasingly to the conclusion that what we're living inside is a very shit version of state capitalism. That, the state, the bourgeois state, possible prior position of the bourgeois state is the one where it manages the relation between capital and other factors of society, labor, previously the aristocracy. And obviously that's only for the benefit of the bourgeoisie, but in itself in some sense. But once these kind of factions are taken out, but at the same time, capital itself goes into immense crisis, what do we have? Instead, we have a government which takes capital into itself and operates again, still for the tiny class, not for the mass, but in a state manner. And especially for kind of the states at the top, such as the United States, it has this constant crisis where it has to retreat, has to strike at its own previous allies, and adopts this neo-mercantilist foreign policy, as we see with Trump very, very clearly, where it begins to traffic and attack its allies as a part of a continuous effort to shore up its own failing capitalism. So he says that neo-mercantilist is a site, nice throwback to June's Chome. I'm still very proud that I think my best video I've done on here is the one where I talk about why Paul is the hero of June, despite people saying otherwise, in the context of Nietzsche's account of the ancient Greek guy who everyone only remembers having sex with his mother, despite the fact that I don't discuss that, but now I've forgotten apart from the fact he has sex with his mother. Oh dear, oh dear. The postmodernist meltdown of culture into the economy is triggered by the fractal interlock of commoditization and computers, a transical entropy dissipation from the international trade to market-oriented software that thaws out competitive dynamics from the cryobanks of modernist corporatization. Commerce re-implements space inside itself, assembling a universe exhaustively imminent to cyber-capital functionality. Neoclassical equilibrium economics is immersed into computer-based non-equilibrium market escalations, themed by artificial agencies, imperfect information, suboptimal solutions, lock-in, increasing returns and convergence. As digital micro-tuned markets, meta-programs meshes with techno-scientific soft engineering, positive non-linearity rages through the machines. Cyclonic torsion moans. It is an interesting thing when the next crisis happens. I'm not sure if I believe in the next crisis. I'm not sure if there ever was, either of us, of course. I'm not even sure there will be a next crisis in the sense that we have previous capitalist crises. I feel like we're so deeply integrated, the state and capital, and there's a constant interest in avoiding a stock market crash, that there just won't be one ever again. That the numbers will always be tuned and bumped and grasped with. And there's never another market crash. But okay, let's imagine there is. If there is another market crash, how will the AI agents that operate so much of the trading economy, how will they operate? AI agents of the old kind and AI agents of the new kind. How will they interact with the state? So the state isn't shy about the power it has over the market, especially the stock market, just close it, slam shut. When the next crisis happens, will the neo-mercantilist state be able to grasp better with the stock market, or will these AI agents manage to crash it out before they manage to do so? Superiority voiced in Marxism. While Chinese materialist dialectic denegativize itself in the direction of a schizophrenizing systems dynamics, progressive dissipating top-down historical destinations into the Tao-drenched special economic zones, a re-Hegelized Western Marxism degenerates from the critique of political economy into a state-sympathizing monothology of economics, siding with fascism against deregulation. The left exercises national conservatism, asphyxiating its vestigial capacity for speculative mutation into a morass of cold, depressive guilt culture. Interesting. Not sure how true this one is. Because it's not fascism that the left has allowed himself as, and I think this is actually a point where contemporary Nick Land is much more correct than 1990s Nick Land. 1990s Nick Land saw he might just be describing the same thing in different words, but later in Nick Land's career, he would make clear that what he saw the left as aligning with was the regulative state, and the regulative state of constant expansion, of a state which seek to regulate everything, and in doing so, slow down capitalism and slow down acceleration, became a de-accelerating process. Is this what he's describing here, or is it something else? So obviously, we have reached a point, we continue to reach a point, where it seems that the best managers of capitalism, it becomes more and more obvious, becomes more and more true every day, that the best managers of capitalism, the best managers of allowing capitalism to accelerate in a way which seems productive and seems possible, is the Chinese state, is the Chinese Communist Party. Soon suggesting that he has a very specific understanding of fascism in a very libertarian way, where fascism is regulation. Yeah, I mean, that's true. And if that's the case, we can kind of integrate the Nick Land of the 90s and the contemporary Nick Land. Neoconservatism jumps paleo-revolutionarism because it understands that postmodern or climaxed cynicism, capitalism, is saturated by critique that immediately clocks up theoretical antagonisms as inconsequential redundancy. Communist iconography has become raw material for the advertising industry, and denudation of the spectacle sells interactive multimedia. The left degenerates into secocratic collaboration with pseudo-organic unities of self, family, community, nation, with the defensive strategies of repression, protection, denial, censorship, exclusion, and restriction. The real danger comes from elsewhere. In this one, where he seems to get the opposite of the point, completely wrong here, it would seem, and because it seems the opposite is the case, where our left is collaborating with the state, not in favor of the self, family, community, nation, but rather that the left collaborates with the state in their deliberate dissolution of family, community, nation. Though he's very right that neoconservatism cucks paleoconservatism every single time, as we see again as the USA marches to war with Venezuela. Hot revolution. Which is the revolutionary path? Deleuze and Guattari asks. Is there one? To withdraw from the world market, as Samir Amin advises third world countries to do, in a curious reversal of the fascist economic solution? Or might it go in the opposite direction? To go still further, that is, in the movement of the market of decoding and deteriorization, for perhaps the flows are not yet deteriorized enough, not decoded enough from the viewpoint of theory and the practice of a high-low schizophrenic character, not to withdraw from the process, but to go further, to accelerate the process, as Nietzsche puts it. In this matter, the truth is that we haven't seen anything yet. A Sino-Pacific boom and automized global economic integration crashes the neo-colonial world system. Very right, Nick Land. The metropolis is forced to re-endogenize its crisis. Yep. Hyperfluid capital. That would be better if I didn't provide significant commentary on the thing. I just, whenever he says something right, I'd go like, yep. And whenever he says something wrong, I'd be like, nope. Hyperfluid capital deteriorization to the planetary level divists the first world of geographic privileges, resulting in Euro-American neo-mercantilist panic reactions. So insanely true. So insanely true right now. Welfare state deterioration, cancerizing exclaves of domestic underdevelopment, political collapse, and the release of cultural toxins that speed up processes of I struggle on the easiest word, disintegration, in a vicious circle. Convergent anti-authoritarianism emerges, labeled by tags such as meltdown acceleration, Siberian invasion, Skitno tactics, K-tactics, bottom-up bacterial warfare, efficient neo-nihilism, voodoo anti-humanism, synthetic feminization, rhizomatics, connectionism, Quang contagion, viral amnesia, microinsurgency, winter mutation, neotropy, dissipating proliferation, and lesbian vampirism among their destinations, frequently pornographic, abusive, or terroristic in nation. This massively distributed matrix technology tendency is orientated at the disabling of ROM command programs, sustaining all macro and micro government entities, globally concentrating themselves at the human security system. This is an interesting one because it's kind of threatened to emerge at various points in the past 3 decades. We can see it in the anti-globalization movement in the 90s and early 2000s. And then we can kind of see it again with the resurgence of the Zapatista movement alongside what was going on in Rojava and so on. But it never quite became the system that Land's imagining here. Scientific intelligence is already massively artificial. Even before AI arrives in a lab, it arrives itself by way of artificial life. This one, it seems, you got it definitely backwards. That we're creating artificial life now, but it's a lot stupider than our artificial intelligences. And our artificial intelligences still aren't very smart. Where formalist AI is incremental and progressive, caged in the pre-specified databases and processing routines of expert systems, connectionist or anti-formalist AI is explosive and opportunist, engineering time. It breaks out non-locally across intelligenic networks that are technical, but no longer technological, since they elude both theory dependency and behavioral predictability. No one knows what to expect. The Turing cops have to model net sentience, eruption as ultimate nuclear accident, core meltdown, loss of control, soft, auto-replicating feeding regeneratively into social fission, trashed meat all over the place, reason enough for anxiety, even without hardware development about to go critical. This was a big concern in the 1990s that, we would all be killed by biological weapons. Now, for whatever reason, we seem a lot less scared of it. Neither cataclysm begins as fictional sciences. Our ability to arrange atoms lies at the foundation of technology. Drexel notes, those who traditionally involve manipulation of them in unruly hands. The precision engineering of atomic assemblies will dispense with such crude methods, instigating the age of molecular machinery, the greatest technological breakthrough in history. Since neither logos nor history have the slightest chance of surviving this transition, this description is substantively misleading. You can't say that molecular engineering is a technically breakthrough in history because it will abolish history, says Nick Land. The distinction between nature and cannot classify molecular machines and is already obsolete by genetic engineering, wet nanotactics. The hardware-software economy succumbs at the same time. Nanotechnics dissolves matter into intensive singularities that are neutral between particles and signals and imminent to their merging in intelligence, melting terror into seething K-pulp, which unlike grey goo synthesizes microbial intelligence as it proliferates. Even with 1 million bytes of storage, a nanomechanical computer could fit in a box a micron wide, about the size of bacterium. Again, I mean, this is the one bit of the essay, or whatever you'd like to call it, which just didn't come true at all. He imagines again and again that bioengineering, that nanoengineering would be able to produce kind of intelligent moving things at the same pace that hard steel is able to produce intelligent moving things. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, intelligent moving things. And, he talks about atomic assemblies being able to dispense with everything that came before, but actually all it was used to was to make better computer chips. And, better computer chips are a quality of their own, but not quite the total revolution that had been imagined here. The infrastructure of power is a human neurosoft-compatible ROM. Authority instates itself as linear instruction pathways, genetic bamboomery, scriptures, traditions, rituals, and genocratic hierarchies resonate with dominating myth that the nature of reality has always been decided. If you want to find ice, try to think about what is blocking you out of the past. It certainly isn't a law of nature. Temporalization decompresses and intensifies, installing constraints. I just noticed he's spelling this in the American way. Convergent waves signal singularities, registering the influence of the future upon its past. Tomorrow can take care of itself. K-taxis is not a matter of building the future, but dismantling the past. It assembles itself by charting and escaping the technical neurochemical deficiencies for linear progressive paleo domination, and discovers that the future as virtuality is accessible now, according to a model of machinic adjacency that securitized social reality is compelled to repress. This is not remotely a question of hope, aspiration, or prophecy, but of communications engineering, connecting with the efficient, intensive singularities and releasing them from constriction within linear historical development. Virtuality contraposes itself to history as invasion to accumulation. It manners as arrival, even when camouflage is deposits of the past. Transcendent evaluation of an infection presupposes a measure of insulation from it. Viral efficiency is a terminal criterion. Intelligence infections tend their hosts. Retrophage, an interactively escalating parasitic replicator, sophisticating itself through nonlinear involvement with techno-capitalist immunocrash. Its hypervirulent terminal subroutines of variously designed Quang, Meltdown virus, or futuristic flu. It is an emphatically anti-Siberian essay, describes the postmodern version of this outbreak in quaintly humanistic terms. Someone is complaining that the text is too small. Can I make it bigger? I can, but then do I lose my words? I think the bits where he talks about biology and bacteria and so on would read better if we just imagined that what he actually meant, what he incidentally meant, what he meant to say. When he was talking about these things, he actually was talking about memes, and not biological memes, but cyberspace memes. In which a time further into the future than the one in which we exist and choose, infects the host present, reproducing itself in simulacra until it destroys all the original chromocytes of the host's imagination. The elaboration of their diagnosis exhibits a mixture of acuity, confusion, and profound conservatism. Not thinking about the increasing human heritage dams up the flow of cultural time and deprives future generations, both of their birthrights as participants in a life struggle and attainment of the species, and the very notion of history as an irreversible flow, encompassing generations, maturation, and the transfers of wisdom and trust from parents to child, teachers to students. The futuristic flu is a weapon of biopsychic violence sent by psychopathic children against their narcissistic parents. It's war. Kennedy had the moon landing program. Reagan had Star Wars. Clinton had the first wave of cyberspace psychosis, even before the film. Manned spaceflight was a stunt. It does increasingly seem that way. SDI was strategic SF. With the informational superhighway, media nightmares take off on their own. Spokes dystopia delivery as election platforms. Politics trading on its own digital annihilation. War in cyberspace is continuous with this simulation. Very, very, very true. Military intelligence, fighting future wars which are entirely real, even when they're never implemented outside computer systems. Not quite true. Not yet. Locking onto the real enemy crosses smoothly into virtual kill. A simulation meticulously adapted to market predators hunting for consumer class and audience rating among the ferocious relics of Technodome. Multimedia top boxes are target acquisition devices. The fusion of the military and the entertainment industry consummates a long engagement. Drones. Convergent TV, telecoms, and computers sliding mass software consumption into neo-jungle and total war. The way games work begins to matter completely, and cyberspace makes a superlative torture table. And cyberspace makes superlative torture chambers. Try not to let the security types take you to the stims. Conceptions of agency unstrictly from media environments. Print massifies to a national level. Telecoms coordinate at a global level. TV electronizes monads into delocalized space. Digital hypermedia takes action outside real time. Immersion presupposes amnesia and conversion of tactile memory. With the AN-SAT axis supplementing tridimensional interspatial movement, it's a variable measure of immersion, gauging entrance to and exit from 3D spatialities. Voodoo passages to the Black Mirror. It will scare the fuck out of you. I think it's interesting because if we imagine that Nick Land here is not quite grasping how important the internet would be, and he's still talking about TV and all that kind of bullshit that doesn't matter. He's still much more keenly aware of how much the internet will matter than nearly everyone else who's writing the time, even though he's still not nearly there. Cyberpunk tortures fiction in intensity, patches out of the cache flux, mangled, techno-compressed, heteroglossic jargons, and sets in a future so close it connects, jungled by hypertrophic commercialization, social political heat death, cultural hybridity, feminization, programmable information systems, hypercrime, neural interlacing, artificial space and intelligence, memory training, personality transplants, body modification, soft and wetware viruses, non-linear dynamic processes, molecular engineering, drugs, guns, schizophrenia. It explores mystificatory fetishism as an opportunity for camouflage, anonymous cache, fake electronic identifiers, zones of disappearance, pseudo-fictional narratives, viruses hidden in data systems, commodities concealed in replicated weapon packages, and anticipated special effects. Level 1, or world space, is an anthropomorphically scaled, predominantly visually confirmed, massively multi-format slotted reality system that is obsolescing very rapidly. Garbage time is running out. Can what is playing you make it to level 2? Meltdown has a place for you. As a schizophrenic, HIV transsexual, Chinese Latino stim-addicted LA hooker with an implanted mirror shades and a bad attitude. Blitzer and poly drug mix of K-Nova, synthetic serotonin, and female orgasm analogs. You've just iced 3 Turing cups with a highly cinematic 9mm automatic. The residue of animal twang in your nerves transmits imminent quake, catastrophe. Zero is coming in, and you're on the run. Metrophage tunes you into the end of the world. Call it Los Angeles. Government is wrought to its core, with narco-capitalist and collapsing messily. Its recession leaves an urban war space of communication arteries, fortifications, and free fire zones, policed by a combination of high-intensity LAP air mobile forces and borderline Nazi private security organizations. You don't say. Along the social fracture lines, multimedia gigabucks, tangles, sadomachinists, for fuck's sake. I can't do it. With tracks of dynamic and development, where viral neoleprosy spreads among ambient tectonic tension static, drifts of densely cementized crazy intelligence, garbage twitch and stink in fucked weather, tropical heat. I think it's interesting. This is often imagined, and it seemed in 2020 that this was what was going to imagine. This is what was going to happen. You know, up until, what was it called again? That thing that happened in Seattle? The Chaz. We were like, when Chaz happens, it was like, wow, Nick Land and Meltdown was so right. But it seems for a long time, authority is still able to reinsert itself. And it seems rather that authority will be the last thing that still exists, longer than the social system. It's an interesting contrast to what happened in the Second World, where even after, you know, the Assad government lost control of various areas, it was still paying salaries in these places. That's not what I imagine our future will be. I think the US federal government will far first stop paying salaries in dissident states than it will stop sending cops and worse than cops into these same areas. Soon notes that Nick Land was on the feminization hype. Yep, he was. Very, very clearly. He knew. Through the directed warrens and at the heat of darkness, feral youth cultures splice neo-rituals with innovative weapons, dangerous drugs, and scavenge infotech. As their skins migrate to machine interfaces, they become mottled and reptilian. They kill each other for artificial body parts, exploring the outer reaches of meaningless sex, tinker with their DNA, and listen to loud electrosonic mayhem and touched by human feeling. Shutting down your identity requires a voyage out to the K-space interzone. Zootic effectivity flatlines across the smooth continuations plateaus and into simulated subversions of the near future. Scorched vivid green by alien sex and war, you were drawn into the dripping depths of the net, where dynamic ice security forces and K-gorillas stalk each other through labyrinth and erogenous zones, tangle in disease elaborations of desire. Twisted trading systems have turned the net into a jungle, pulsing with digital disease. Yeah, it fucking is. Defense packages, commercialized predators, headhunters, IO, and escaped AIs hiding from Asimov security. Terminal commodities, hypotheticization implements a denial of humanity as xenosentience in artificial space. Biohazard, for the future of war, study bacteria. Information is their key. Taking down antibiotic defense systems has involved them in every kind of infiltration. Net communicated adaptivity, cryographic subtlety, plastic modularization, and synergistic coalition. State military apparatus have no monopoly on bacterial warfare, of only which a minuscule fragment is bacterial biological. An interesting question is, I wonder if they'll bother to put these little artificial brains, as in the fleshy minds that we're making in the lab. If they'll ever bother to put those in drones, or is Nick Land wrong again, and the cold steel is so much more advanced than the biology? Because it seems still that if you could hack a certain kind of animal brain into a drone, into the steel of a drone, that would be a much, much better kind of target acquisition system than any machining one. But the technology just seems to be so far backwards and so basic still. Bugs in the system. Margulis suggests that nucleated cells are the mutant product of atmospheric oxidation of an atmospheric oxidation catastrophe 3 billion years ago. They are synthetic emergency capsules in which they took refuge in as mitochondria. Biotics become secretized biology. You can tell I'm a philosopher, not a biologist, because I was doing all right before, and then all the biology words to come up, and I just start crying. Nucleization concentrates ROM within a command core where, deep in the genomic ice, DNA format planetary traumas register primary repression of bacteria. Bacteria are partial rather than whole objects, networking through plastic and transversal replicator sex rather than through meiotic and generational reproducer sex, integrating and reprocessing viruses as opportunities for communicative mutation. In the bacterial systems, all coding are reprogrammable with a cut and paste, unspeciated genetic transfer. Bacterial sex is tactile, continues with making war, and has no place for odipedal formations of sedentary biological identity. Synthesizing bacteria with retroviruses enables everything that DNA can do. K-tactics. The bacterial or xenogenic diagram is not restricted to microbial scale. Macrobacterial assemblages collapse generational hierarchies of reproductive wisdom into lateral networks of replicator experimentation. There is no true biological primitivism. All extant biosystems have a being equally evolved, so there's no true ignorance. It is only the accumulative genocratic model of learning that depicts syncretic continuity deficiencies as underdevelopment. Foucault delineates. That's not a hard word. I should not be struggling with that one. The contents of power is a strategy without subject, ROM-locking learning in a box. Its enemy is a tactic without strategy, replacing the political territorial imagery of conquest and resistance with nomad micro-military sabotage and evasion, reinforcing intelligence. I've just realized I'm not an hour late, am I? I'm actually an hour early, I think. All political institutions are Siberian military targets. Take universities, for instance. Learning surrenders control to the future, threatening established power. It is vigorously suppressed by all political structures, which replace it with dolicizing and conformist education, reproducing privilege as wisdom. Schools are social devices whose specific function is to and incapacitate learning, and universities are employed to legitimate schooling through perpetual reconstitution of global social memory. What he didn't imagine here was that universities just stop being research teaching institutions at all and become a really weird form of kind of resort / mental health place. The meltdown of metropolitan education systems in the near future, is accompanied by a quasi-punctual bottom-up takeover of academic institutions, precipitating their mutation into amnesiac Patraspace exploration zones and bases manufacturing Siberian soft weaponry. To be continued. Nikolai. That's all. We're done. Bye-bye. Ooh, I'm really, really hot and thirsty. I'm the contradiction between the two. Oh, I'm not hot or wet. I'm not hot and wet or cold and dry. I'm rather dry and hot. Sound got soft. Yeah, it's probably just because I was holding my microphone to my mouth. Hot is good. Yeah, I mean, it's a fine thing to have at this time of year. I'm so grimly sad about the change in the seasons. The sun is now going down so early, as opposed to earlier in the year. Well, in the middle of the year in the UK, especially in the north of the UK, it's just endless sunlight. But then, of course, we pay for it terribly, dearly in the autumn and in the winter. Okay, Thomas, I get it. I'll stop picking up the microphone. Cool. That is all. This was a reading series. Was it a good idea? I'm not sure. The main appeal of doing this as a reading series was I didn't have to do any work this week. I just read the thing once, and that was all I needed to do. Because it takes me a shockingly long amount of time to arrange a solo podcast. User unreasonably complicated string of letters and characters asks, is Deleuze's guitar a useful knowledge for trying to add to understanding the world? I would not say so. I think you are much better off just reading Marx and reading boring mainline Marxists. Just read Marx and then read kind of contemporary Marxists who are intelligent for contemporary analysis of the present moment. I don't think you need to read schizoanalysis to get anywhere in life. Yes, I'm increasingly coming to the perspective that if Ben is not coming back on a Sunday, well, I guess one option would be give up. But assuming I don't give up, I just need to get another co-host. Because doing it alone is just so hard. So just a constant strain to produce something for the week and then to actually deliver it. Well, you don't necessarily have to listen to me, but I don't think it's the right path. I think the right path is boring people. And if you want to read someone like Deleuze, if you want to read someone like Nick Land, read them not to fundamentally understand the world, but read them to have fun. Because they are fun to read, or they can be fun to read. Read them as literary works. And when they accidentally manage to predict something, go, nice, cool. But don't take them too terribly seriously. But yes, goodbye. I'm going to play the outro.